As a walled city, Edinburgh had a large wall around the southern side of it to protect it from invading armies. And the wall itself had 6 gates. And so the reason all these roads met onto one street was because they all would have passed down and entered into the one single gate. And the road that we're passing down is the West Port. It would have brought us into the West Gate. Now the building coming up just ahead of us on the left-hand side, you can probably just about glimpse it behind the tree there. This wonderful 1960s, 70s office building. Fantastic architecture, the kind of thing that gets preserved in Edinburgh. The office building itself is built on a site formerly known as Tanner's Close. And it was in Tanner's Close that 2 of Edinburgh's best known but least liked occupants once lived. They were known, well they weren't known, they were called William Burke and William Hare. Burke and Hare were Irish immigrant workers. They'd come over to Edinburgh from Ireland to come and work on the construction of the Union Canal, which was happening just to the east of the city, just behind where we are now. Now at this time, in the middle of the 19th century, Edinburgh was also leading the way in terms of medical research. They had an anatomy school up as part of the university. And the anatomy school was reliant on the donation of bodies in order for them to dissect them, to understand how the human body worked. Initially, the only bodies they had access to were the bodies of hanged criminals. If you were caught and convicted of a crime, you were executed and your body was taken to the anatomy school. We hanged a lot of people, but there still weren't enough bodies. So the anatomy school started paying people. If you were a family living here, but you were too poor to have a relative buried, so when your mother died, if you couldn't afford to give them the funeral, you could take her body up to the medical school and they would buy it off you for £10, which was a huge amount of money in those days. £10 at that time, the equivalent would be, well, if you were working as a servant in the new town, working for one of the big posh families, you would earn about £8 a year as a servant there. So £10 a body was a lot of money. So this building here, out on the left-hand side, this wonderful construction, is on the site of Tanner's Close, where William Burke and William Hare lived. William Burke and William Hare worked on the construction of the canal, but they quite liked the idea of having a bit more money. They liked the idea of getting £10 a body, but unfortunately they didn't have any relatives living here that they would be able to sell on. So Burke and Hare came up with quite an ingenious plan, really. They used to hang around in the grass market, the area that we're heading down to just now. And they'd hang around the bars here. The grass market, as well as being a market area, is also where a number of the big coaching inns were located. So as a visitor to the city, if you'd arrived by coach from London, you would probably be staying somewhere down here in the grass market. Burke and Hare hung around the bars and the pubs. They made friends with people. They made friends with people from visitors to the city, people like you. They'd sit there, they'd chat, they'd tell you stories, they'd tell you jokes, they'd buy you a drink, and then they'd buy you another drink. Then they'd buy you a few more drinks, and very quickly you'd be too drunk to know what was happening. Which was probably just as well, really. Having got you drunk down here in the grass market, they'd take you back to Tanner's Close, in the boarding house that they lived in. And when they got you there, they'd kill you. They did it quite nicely, all credit to them. They realised that the medical school wouldn't buy a body if there were signs of violence to it. So they devised a way of killing you that involved leaving no outward signs of a struggle. I won't go into the details, but it sort of involved sitting on your face. Over the course of about 18 months, William Burke and William Hare are believed to have murdered somewhere in the region of 20 people. And they got £10 for each of them, obviously. Eventually they made a mistake. They made friends with a visitor to the city. They got them drunk, they took them back, they befriended them, they killed them, they took them up to the medical school, they got their £10. And then one of the medical students drew the cloth back the next morning and recognised Uncle Fred lying on the slab. Somebody that they knew could not possibly have died of natural causes. So the police caught up with Burke and Hare. They very quickly worked out what had been going on. William Hare was a coward. He turned evidence against William Burke. And William Burke was hanged as a murderer. He was hanged for all 20 crimes. So they used to execute people down here in the grass market. Just ahead of us was where the gallows used to be. I said they used to get 10,000 people into the seating up at the stadium for the tattoo. They used to get 20,000 people crammed here into the grass market to watch people being hanged. If you were lucky and you were staying in one of these coaching inns, you could watch the executions without even having to get out of bed. That's luxury for you. This is all part of Edinburgh's Jazz and Blues Festival, by the way, taking place down here. Happens every year. So William Burke was found guilty and was lined up for execution. They didn't execute him here in the grass market. He was a serial killer. He was a celebrity. They hanged him up on the Royal Mile where they could get 40,000 people in to watch him. And after they'd hanged him, made sure he was dead, they cut him down and they sold his body to the medical school for dissection. And you can still see bits of it if you go to the Surgeons' War Museum on North Bridge. You can still see William Burke's skeleton and sections of his skin that they took off to line books. So we've now left the grass market and we're heading down Cowgate. And originally, although the grass market was where animal feed got sold, out here on the left hand side was where a cattle market was located. So cows were brought into the city for sale here at the cattle market. And they brought them in along this old Drovers Road, the Cowgate. And they used to drive cattle along here, today we drive tourists along here. Some people would say not much has changed. I wouldn't possibly dream of saying such a thing. Coming up on the right hand side, today it's a pub, but formerly it was Taylor's Hall. This is one of the oldest surviving buildings on the Cowgate, and it was where the Guild of Tailors had their headquarters here in the city. And if you're very quick and look up to your left hand side as we come past this building, you'll be able to see very briefly up Old Fish Market Close. This gives you a sense of how close and narrow these streets were. And that was also a market street. That wasn't just a road, that was a market. We're shortly going to be passing under South Bridge. South Bridge was constructed as the first purpose-built shopping street in Edinburgh to link the Royal Mile with the south side. It's actually 19 arches in total, but this is the only one that you can see externally. All the others are covered up by the buildings that have been built alongside. Here on the left hand side, the last remaining cow on the Cowgate. Looks like it needs milk. In the middle of the 19th century, this part of Edinburgh became known as Little Ireland due to the large number of Irish immigrant families who settled here. Like Burke and Hare, they came to the city to work either on the Union Canal or simply to escape the potato famine in Ireland. And just the other side of the Holiday Inn, coming up on the left hand side, is St Patrick's Church, which was the Catholic church which served the Irish community here in Little Ireland. So having entered Edinburgh at the other side of the grass market as we came down the West Port, we'd now be leaving it again. As we pass through this junction in a minute or two, if you just look up to your right hand side and look to the right hand side of the road, and you'll see a one of the largest remaining sections of one of the defensive walls that was built around the city. This is the Flodden Wall, which was the second of 3 walls that were built. The Flodden Wall was built after the Battle of Flodden in 1513. This was the worst defeat that the Scottish army ever suffered at the hands of the English. In the space of one afternoon, 10,000 soldiers, noblemen were killed, including the king. So there, up on the right-hand side, the Flodden Wall, built in order to keep the English army out. So we're heading into the Holyrood or Canongate area of the city. Originally this was an entirely separate borough. Once it became integrated into part of Edinburgh itself, it became a very industrialised part of the city. A lot of big businesses and industrial premises located down here. Brewing was a big industry in Edinburgh. If you didn't have clean water, it was actually safer to drink beer than it was to drink the water. Children as young as 6 would have been drinking beer routinely. In Glasgow, I think they still do. Many of the buildings down here have been renovated very recently. There's a lot of regeneration that's gone on here. Just coming up, if you're looking out to the left, you'll see Pizza Express, which is built into one of the old brewery buildings. So it's built into the shell of the brewery, just here on the left-hand side. Out on the right-hand side, we're coming up to the new Scotsman building. This is the new headquarters for the Scotsman newspaper, Scotland's national newspaper. It was located down here in 2004 to be closer to the Scottish Parliament building. And we're now turning into our dynamic Earth. This was Scotland and Edinburgh's Millennium Project from the year 2000. You can see the canopy there on the right-hand side vaguely resembles the Millennium Dome in London. I think it also looks a little bit like a maggot that's been skewered with cocktail sticks. It's a geological exhibition. It traces the history of the Earth from the Big Bang right up to the modern day. It's a great hands-on exhibition for kids and great for a wet afternoon on the few occasions that we get rain in Edinburgh. If you wanted to get off here to explore the Palace of Holyrood House, the Holyrood Park or the Parliament building, this is a good spot to do it.